So, guys, I do want to talk about AEW, and part of me, like my neighbors have, a young kid, so you may hear just crying because that's what babies do. But I do want to just say that I do want to talk about AEW, and I want to give you guys at least 10 reasons why I think that AEW has been losing viewership. And the first reason that I'll say, and this is not in order, is that it's a fad to hate AEW. And we all have to remember that when AEW started, there was this whole cult of personality around AEW. People did not like WWE. People felt Vince was staying there a little too long. And then also there was a lot of wrestlers that were treated very poorly by WWE. You look at how many people that they released during the pandemic. You also look at how they made record profits and decided not to keep people. And then also, too, there are wrestlers like Dean Ambrose and other people who were just not happy with their storylines. So there was a lot of just like pro AEW because Vince was doing a lot of things wrong. So sometimes what happens when something is overly praised is that people just are eventually going to hate it. As the old expression in Spider-Man goes, despite everything you've done for them, eventually people will hate you. And sometimes when something is overhyped, people overlook the problems. And then over time, people just really say, okay, well, this thing, that thing doesn't work, and that's why I'm not attracted to it. And that's also very true with AEW, that I do think that because there's been so much overpraise of it in the past that it seems now that it's become a fad almost to dislike the company. And I think that the solution of it is that AEW just needs to be AEW. They need to really work on their weaknesses, or Tony Khan has to be unapologetic and be like, okay, this is what our company's identity is, and just go with it. The other weakness I would say about AEW, one of the losing viewership, is their inability to build new stars and maintain new stars. The best example is Wardlow, because a lot of times in AEW you see people like Brian Cage, who's a big beefy boy, and what happens to a lot of the muscular people? The muscular people usually lose a lot. You look at Wardlow, and he was actually the most over person in the company for a while, and he disappeared on television. He had a really bad match with Orange Cassidy, and he's also was part of the Undisputed Kingdom, and he did nothing with that. So it kind of just says to everybody, really, that ultimately when you have somebody with a really great build, you can't really see their future in the company. And it's almost like a little too late with Wardlow. Like, you can't like reset him. It'll be really hard to do that. But, you look at wrestlers like, Darby Allin, and you kind of look at, how stupid it was for him to want to go up to Mount Everest this year. He was like the biggest star in the company after Sting retired, but he was being a dumbass, and he was like saying, oh, well, I want to go to Mount Everest. No, you tell Tony would say, if Tony had any balls, you say, no, you're not going to Mount Everest. You're going to be the AEW champion, because you got to, ride that momentum, really. And we got to have storylines to get to that point, really. You look at somebody like MJF. MJF is a great example of somebody who actually, had talent, had a direction, and when he transitioned it, and then he used that to become a heavyweight champion. He did not do something like, say, I'm going to go after the TNT title, and I'm going to like have a kickoff with Orange Cassidy. So there's a lack of building new stars. The third thing is disorganization, and I will just like talk about a really disorganized show that usually with AEW. The best way I'll do it is that I think with like WWE, all their shows, their three major shows have a purpose. NXT is a developmental, and the point of NXT is that you see wrestlers of the future, so you get behind them and you see them grow and gain skills, and then you also have dreams of them saying, you have dreams of like, Trick Williams or Bray Wyatt and Roman Reigns and the Motor City Machine Guns and Joe Hendry and a few other wrestlers as well. You have dreams of them like going to a Royal Rumble or a WrestleMania type of thing, really. So the point of NXT is just to introduce you to new stars, make you kind of become a fan of them, and then you just wish for them to be on the main roster. And then the point of Raw and SmackDown is it's really just dividing the rosters because honestly, there's way too many people for one show. So Raw is supposed to be Raw and SmackDown are supposed to be divisions of the roster. So you look at AEW and you look at ROH, and ROH is a clusterfuck. It's not developmental. It's really just you take all these people that you got through the ROH contracts, and they just have match after match, really, and there's really no sense of direction. But in small doses, they actually have people go to the main roster. Like you see, Queen Aminata is the best example of that. And she was in ROH for a while. Now she's on the main roster, and she's the only person that I could really think of. And then also, it should be a developmental. It should be like you have all these extra wrestlers who are in ROH, and you should kind of say, okay, you look at somebody like Dalton Castle, and you look at how people are pop for him, really. So, you have something where Dalton Castle spends some time in ROH, and you're like, okay, maybe he can go over to Collision, and if he's really, really popular, then put him in on Dynamite. Or you do something like Mark Briscoe, great example. Like, the problem is that he should not be the ROH champion that much longer. You have to give it to somebody else. I'll say Christian or another wrestler, and then you take Mark Briscoe and then you make him part of AEW. Imagine if Mark Briscoe and John Moxley had a match. So, the identity of ROH should be really a developmental. And then the next thing is that with Collision, it should be a split of the roster. You take, half the roster, you put them on Collision, and they have nothing but Collision matches. And then eventually, if you find a couple of people that stand out, you bring them over to Dynamite, and you kind of say, okay, well, I want to challenge the champion. And then you have that champion go to and from shows, the AEW champion. And then Dynamite should also be like, the All-Stars. You have, your people that actually draw. You have your Will Ospreay on Dynamite. You have MJF on Dynamite. You have the Young Bucks and Jack Perry and the EVPs just because they actually have all the titles and stuff like that, and people just recognize. You have Kenny Omega on Dynamite, but you have people like Mark Briscoe, like FTR, the Young Buck, FTR, the Acclaimed. They could be on Collision because even though they have some drawing power, they can do well just sticking on one show, really, and that's what it really supposed to be. It really should be like ROH. Is where people go who are from ROH, who don't have experience on television, or there's like people like the Outrunners who should be in ROH, get some exposure, then get some more exposure on Collision, and then just have something on Dynamite. So you can't just have you can't do something like have wrestlers appear on all three shows. You can't do something like say, okay, randomly we're gonna have Japanese wrestlers or wrestlers from Mexico or other things like that, when there's no purpose, really. You can't have something like CM Punk debut on Rampage when that should be a Dynamite or a pay-per-view type of thing, really. So I really think that the third weakness is disorganization of shows and moments. I think the fourth thing that I would say is being out of touch. And, the big reason why I would say that is that, you look at something like, what happened at All Out. There's a lot more negativity around AEW because people felt that went too far, really. And I understand, it's storytelling and everything like that, really. But the reason why, but I would say too that yes, you got up 8% in the ratings, but if it goes down the next couple of weeks, then you just know that the hardcore stuff doesn't really work. And the next thing that I would say is you look at John Moxley's new gimmick, being inspired by Romper Stomper, a film about a neo-Nazi. It would be very similar if he was inspired by American History X. There's a lot of people talking about that, and they said last week some of his lines were from Adolf Hitler. And, like I've said, I'll say is that honestly, yes, it's offensive, yes, it's controversial, even though you look at, WWE's history of anti-black, homophobic, and misogynistic stuff, really. So everybody's had their foot in shit, really. Or you even look at TNA wrestling with how they had Jeff Hardy perform when he was intoxicated, or you or they've there's been like other things in TNA wrestling or WCW. Like every company's had like their foot in something taboo, really. But if your company is not doing well with shock value stuff, what sense does it make to kind of do more of that? So it's not good that they're out of touch, really. And as OTR Central said, attitudes change. And then, as people say, like storytelling is really what's is really what WWE is excelling at. Even though the whole mommy versus daddy dom thing, their factions, even though that's like even though that's kind of a dumb story, is willing to WWE's kind of made something that's probably going to be like something so simple that's going to last maybe 8 or 9 months, really. And then you kind of look at the bloodline thing. That's a feud that's been going on for a couple of years, and other things like that, really. So like these things they've learned how to kind of extend that. But you look at AEW, and there's nothing that really is captivating. I think that the only thing that captivates me is seeing Dustin Rhodes eventually become the ROH or AEW champion. But out of touch just kind of really means that I really think that sometimes you look at the show and you don't really have a sense of anything that captivates you because it's all out of touch. And I think that ultimately, if storytelling is what is getting wrestlers over, and I'm seeing more of that in Collision and Dynamite, keep going that direction. And I really think that's going to pay off in the long term. I think the fourth reason is predictable matches. And this is one of the big things that's been hurting AEW is predictable matches. Because if you're going to see a match between, tonight, Ricochet and Mortos, who's going to win? Obviously, Ricochet's going to win. It would be cool if Mortos actually scored a victory on him, or if there was something where, like Hologram actually hit Ricochet and then Mortos got a victory, do something a little different. There could also be something where you can kind of do like a 30-minute limit and you can have them be evenly matched, really, So, that would be good to do some unpredictability. I was talking about Wrestle Dream, and I was saying that the Outrunners and FTR should be a match, and you should have the Outrunners actually beat FTR because most people don't think that's going to happen. When you have Takeshita versus Okada, and I think you're going to do that at Wrestle Dream. The problem with that is we all know Okada's going to win. When you look at the shows, there's really just a huge sense of who's going to win, really. So if I'm going to watch an AEW match, and like I said, it's going to be Kyle Fletcher versus Will Ospreay. Why would I want to watch that match when I know, if I was to bet money in Vegas, I'll put my $2,000 paycheck on Will Ospreay, really. Why not do something like have Kyle Fletcher actually win, or have a count out, or have Don Callis screw him over, so then Kyle Fletcher wins. So you have to think about unpredictability. That's important. Sometimes it can be not good, and sometimes it can be good. I think another thing is, as I said, then why would I want to watch a 30-minute match with a bunch of spots if I know who's going to win automatically, really? It's just extending that. I really think that as like a sixth reason is that, is that people want to leave the company. There's talks about, Ricky Starks wanting to leave, and then there's also talk about John Moxley wanting to leave. There's also talks about I forgot his name, but Daniel Garcia wanting to leave, and you have Mark Henry and other people. So that's never a good look for the company, and I understand why that is. And there's Ethan Page and other people, and there's two reasons. The main reason is that you have so many people on that roster. You have over 100 people for 3 shows, and most of them are not on television. Most of them are just riding out their contracts. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that they have just repeat matches. Like Top Flight is just there to do a bunch of spots, or they're not there to kind of build and do a story. So I can imagine as a wrestler, why would I want to be part of a company if my job is just to do the flips and whatever and not live up to my full potential? Like what Action Andretti did, if they really use what he did and just his frustration, if they turn that into something, he could be a big star, but more than likely, he's going to have the match with the House of Black. He's either going to lose, Top Flight's going to lose, and then he's going to go on and being like Mr. Flip Boy. And then I can see him want to go to WWE and be like, okay, I want to actually just work towards something. And then the next part of that is that there's wrestlers that don't feel like they can become wrestlers in AEW. You look at somebody like Brian Pillman Jr., excellent example, that I really, like as Lexus King in WWE, there's a lot more people that care about his future. So, so he's being exposed to an audience. It's a slow burn. He's going to get preferential treatment because he is Brian Pillman's kid. So obviously, when there are some wrestlers that go over to WWE, they know that they're going to work on their skills and they're going to become bigger deals, really. Or in AEW, they may be like, okay, if you have a loud mouth, you can be like, okay, fuck you, Tony Schiavone, fuck you, Arn Anderson, I'm going to do what I want to do. So I think that that's another reason why people leave, is that they feel like they can't become bigger stars in AEW or learn how to be a wrestler, because part of being a wrestler is storytelling. It's also acting, and it's also just minimalism, because you look at WWE, you look at how many matches you've seen between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, and it's still captivating because they're repeating the matches, but they're teaching you that that's what you do, really, because that way it's a slow burn. Then you have a roster with like 30 or 40 people that CM Punk can go through. He's set for life, really, because they know how to spread something thin with they know how to spread it like thin gold, thin but still stuff you want to see, really. So there is a sense with WWE that they're going to teach people to be wrestlers, they're going to teach people to be storytellers, they're going to teach people to be actors, they're going to teach people that if you really care about the craft, there is a better progression of stars. Another great example is Jade Cargill. Like, for example, she was very botchy in AEW. And also the other thing about it was that she had some mic skills, but there's really no direction. And more than likely, she stayed with the company, she would have just become a jobber and whatever. So she realized that in WWE, they can teach her how to wrestle, how to perform, and she cares about becoming bigger and better, really. So sometimes that's more appealing to a wrestler. You don't want to kind of become a one-trick pony. Or you look at somebody like Wardlow after he made it to the top of AEW, what happened, really? So they don't really teach you how to be a wrestler at AEW. They kind of more teach you just to have your match, and that's that, really. There's no acting, there's no storytelling, there's no like system to kind of just help you, rise to the top, really. And again, I would use Top Play as an example. If I had them, I would say, okay, you guys are going to wrestle just an ROH for 6 months. Okay, and then if you do well, you get the audience cheering for you. You're going to be on the ROH pay-per-view, and then you're going to win the 6-man titles or the trios titles, and then you're going to defend it on Collision, and eventually, and then whenever there's a big pay-per-view, I'm going to advocate for you guys to be on the dark matches, and then if they don't have a lot of matches on the show, you guys can be in there, and I'll do something where I'll tell Tony, okay, you guys need time on the microphone, and then what I would do is say, like, okay, then after maybe like 9 months, really, altogether, I'll be like, okay, now they need to be on Dynamite. Now they need to have matches on the pay-per-view. Now you need to like have them in storylines, as a trios, or maybe you kind of they have singles matches. So that way they feel like they're developing their skills, but they're also being rewarded with bigger spots, really, And I would also kind of say that, I just think it's bad leadership with Tony Khan. I think that, obviously, getting rid of CM Punk was a bad choice. He should have got rid of Jack Perry. You keep your money person. I appreciate him having a human resources type of thing or a conflict resolution type of thing, but he should have had that at the beginning. And I think they said that, what happened was that, when the company got launched, they had a dinner and some people were just doing some unprofessional behavior. So it should have been, it should have been something with Tony Khan where he should have said, okay, well, this happened the first time. We need a disciplinary committee. We need human resources. 2 years later is not good. I also think with Tony Khan, he does have he has insecurities and he has a sensitive ego. So sometimes he will go on Twitter and he may be like, okay, as people said, people may say like, okay, if he's going to do something for shock value and he's going to find it cute or whatever, he's going to do that really instead of just like ignoring criticisms. Or you kind of look at what he did with CM Punk, where he showed the footage of the brawlout incident, and that's a very bad look. Like just being so vindictive. And then also, like I've said, and this is gonna be my last point, is that you look at how there's so many shows in April that he had, and knew he cared more about getting even with CM Punk instead of Dynasty, Supercard of Honor, and Battle of the Belts. And then my phone's about to die, but the last big issue with that I can think with AEW, so you need like good leadership, and you need to kind of almost have people coach Tony Khan, or have like people say like have people criticize him, and then those are the people that he should listen to, because they're gonna say like, no, Tony, you know what, he needs like a vice president, almost to kind of like a vice president and a mentor to kind of or like to kind of really, or like an expert advisor, like Shane should be that person. Or if he had a good relationship with Bischoff should have been that person. Or like Ric Flair or somebody else really who is very higher up that can kind of help him through that, because that way they'll kind of tell him just how to present himself, and really just make sure he's a good representative of the company, and just how there are just some things that he can't do. And then the other part of his leadership is he spreads himself too thin. Like I really think Bryan Danielson needs to take over ROH and Collision. You should have like Ric Flair or Big Show, or Christian Cage, or a couple of other like veterans, or even Adam Copeland, and have them kind of run either Collision or ROH really. Give them like, see if they can boost sales, and just say, okay, you're gonna get a percentage of it. That's what I think he should do, because I think he takes on way too much and he doesn't care about that. And I also think our issue with him is he's very wealthy. So like obviously he's gonna bail himself out of any problem. Like I've said, that if Shad Khan's worth $7 billion, AEW is gonna be around $200 million a year. So if they're losing $200 million a year, that's like 35 years to get through $7 billion. So that'll be through Tony's lifetime. It'll be in his like late 70s. If they keep wasting $200 million a year, they had like that $7 billion budget, because Shad's in his 70s. He's going to like be dead in the next 10, 20 years. That's just how life goes really. But I really think that sometimes he has so much money that he's not going to care if it's losing or whatever really. And I think that's the other big issue, is that you don't have a person that cares about bad investments. And you need somebody that needs to advise him that, what, this is a business, you have to really give a shit. And if you don't give a shit, you need to be replaced, or there needs to be a board to kind of remove him, and saying that he needs to be more the promotional person. Or if he does a great job of pay-per-views, put him in that spot, but still as a president of the company, but put him where he's strong, but force him out of things that he's not strong at, because he's just going to fuck up the company. And then overall, I think Shad needs to have a conversation with him and say, this is about making money. This is not a vanity project. Because eventually, he's gonna fuck everybody if he doesn't live up to expectations. Like it should. There's so many good things happening because of AEW. Like obviously, people have jobs. There's exposure on wrestlers. People like Jade Cargill and other wrestlers that have actually had some exposure to AEW going to WWE. Now, because the AEW is paying people a lot more, WWE has to kind of match it in the market really. So AEW needs to be around, and you need to have a good leader around really, because all that goodwill will stop. Go back to WWE monopolizing everything, paying people shit, and that's that really. And then it's also not good for wrestlers. You look at Will Ospreay, where he wrestles in so many different promotions. Or you look at AJ Styles, where after he left TNA, he was in wrestling so many different promotions, and that's not healthy to be flying from Britain to a show in the U.S. to a show in Japan, like a couple times a month, really. So it's good when you have AEW, where it's like, okay, you're here and you just travel with everybody. You don't like fly all over the world because because you need to make a paycheck, because you're working the independents and all that. So the last thing I will also say is that they have way too many special events. Like look at what's happening now. You have Grand Slam, you have the anniversary show, you have Title Tuesday, you have Wrestle Dream, you have a Battle of the Belts show. So you have 5 shows in a period of 4 weeks. From late September to the middle of October, to late September to the middle of October. Late middle of October. I know that sounds a little weird. So they need to cut down on that, and they also have to kind of say too that with all these shows, yes, it's good to have shows like this to actually just, you know, um, promote AEW, have something to look forward to every single week, because that's what WWE does. Like every single week, they try to have to have something to look forward to. So I do think that one problem is that also if you have too many shows, I think Tony Khan falls flat really. So I think that with Grand Slam, what they really need to do is, I know it's Grand Slam and Collision. They really need to say like, okay, we need to have 24 matches that they can draft really. So you put like maybe 6 matches on Grand Slam, 6 matches on the Collision show, then 6 matches on the anniversary show, because you got to make that really good. And then Title Tuesday, you got to say to yourself, okay, what titles should be defended? And ultimately, and if you have a title switch, how can I have that title switch lead to a match at All In? Like I've said, that you should do the trios titles. It should be Pac, Claudio, and Wheeler versus Top Flight. Have Top Flight win that, and you can set up Wheeler versus Claudio, and Pac versus Darby Allin, and also you can set up I think John Moxley's in the, no and those will be the matches. John Moxley's not in that faction really, and then you go set up Top Flight versus the Don Callis family. So you set up 3 matches, and that's what they need to do with these shows, is to set up matches to the pay per view, but also with the Title Tuesday matches and the Battle of the Belts, they really need to switch titles. I think that only one time in their history they switched the belts, and that doesn't mean the belt was vacated. It means that actually it was a champion given to another champion. That was Dustin Rhodes and the Von Erichs versus the Undisputed Kingdom, because they're very, very bad with these shows. Why would I want to look forward to a Battle of the Belts if belts are not going to be switched? You need to kind of switch titles. So that's very, very important. And then, as I said, you do something like, what would happen if you had the show and you had Mark Briscoe and the conglomeration versus the AEW, trios champions, and let's say the trios champions beat down Mark Briscoe and all the other people, and then Mark Briscoe's left in the ring, and then Christian cashes in and says a heavyweight title shot. That means the ROH becomes the ROH champion, and then they have like a match at Wrestle Dream, and it's like, okay, now he's at full power. Now Mark Briscoe and Christian are both at full power, since it wasn't just like an easy win or whatever type of thing, really. So you need to kind of have shows leading to other shows. You need to have shows like Title Tuesday or Battle of the Belts where titles do change. And you also need to fucking defend the AEW titles and the ROH title. Don't do what you did with Will Nightingale, which is CMLL, or do that stupid thing where you have, that Japanese contendership thing that you guys do, where it's like you take, where it's almost like you have to beat the champion twice to actually get the title. So there's things that AEW needs to do to make their show a lot better. And there's a lot of other like talking points, but there's a lot of talking points on why they lose people. And I really think that it's bad leadership. It's not a promising future for wrestlers. It's also just, I really think that they allow people to do what they want a little too much. And I think that Tony is a little disorganized, and I also feel that they really don't have like good storytelling. So how you can tell a story within multiple like special shows and all that. And I really, really think that, as I said, that if I worked for AEW, I would really be like a Jim Cornette. I would really just focus on logic. I would focus on story and build, and I would really say that in my contract, it will say that if I have 10 ideas, you have to at least prove like two of them or three of them, and one of them has to be an idea that I agree with. Like I said about Top Flight, you had Action Andretti show some emphasis. What would happen if they had a match at Battle of the Belts between, as I said, like the Blackpool Combat, like John Moxley's faction versus Top Flight. Wheeler Yuta screws over the John Moxley faction, and it leads to three matches, and you have Wheeler Yuta go from an underdog fighting Claudio, and we kind of see a more grit from him. You go with Pac and Darby Allin, which will be a great match, and then you also set up Top Flight versus the Don Callis family, because I think Don Callis portraying Will Ospreay is going to set up a couple of cool matches down the line, really. So yeah, it's, and as I said, I really just think that it's also another thing too. I think that a lot of people just don't believe in Tony Khan's leadership, and you know, I really think that, as I said, I really think that it's a vanity project. So I really think that, honestly, if he doesn't care, why should anybody else care? It's almost like, a permissive parent. They may be strict with the they may be strict with the older kid because they were strict on the older kid, but they have the younger kid that does whatever they want. The older kid's eventually going to say, you know what, I can do what I want as well, because I'm not going to care. And as I said, like, with professional wrestling, part of it is the characters. So you want to see, like, future stars, and you really believe in these future stars. You want to see their journey progressing and growing through the years. You have to make that happen, and the best way to make that happen is to actually lead them to the top. Really, you don't do something like Wardlow becoming a superstar and then just having a match with Orange Cassidy, or you don't do something like you have Ricky Starks want to leave the company because he's better off as a tag team wrestler. So there's a lot of things that AEW needs to do, really. And I also just think that there's also needs to be a lot of leadership backstage, and if somebody has good ideas and they know it's a great direction, like a Cornette or somebody like that, then Cornette needs to be like, fuck you, this is what we're doing. If you don't like it, get the fuck out of my company. Type of approach. And sometimes you need somebody like that. So I really think that there's a lot of things in AEW that need to improve for it to be successful. And I really think that, as somebody once said, it's like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where sometimes I think that when you watch a show, it's all about matches and moments, but really no storytelling or no progression, really, and it needs to kind of go down that way. So, there's a lot of things that they have right now that could, like, blow up into big things, like my idea for the Blackpool Combat Club, for the John Moxley faction, Wheeler Yuta and the Don Callis family, and the Top Flight. I have my idea is gold for that, and I also think that the other thing I want to see is the Outrunners. I do have an idea for them, and I think they should be wrestling FTR at Wrestle Dream. But these ideas are good that I have. Or you can do what Tony Khan might do and say, okay, we're going to make this Forbidden Door 2, because the show was really to memorialize Antonio Inoki. But again, that wouldn't help anybody, because, again, Forbidden Door should be once a year, where you wrestle wrestlers from all over the world. It shouldn't just be twice a year. And then you got to set up, Full Gear and World's End, your show, your World's End show, which is kind of like, feuds end, feuds start. There's wrestlers they look forward to in 2025, so there's definitely a lot of talking points, and I can talk all day about this, but like AEW, these are my reasons why I think it's not drawing people in, and it's all what Tony Khan wants to do. As CM Punk said, it's his company, he can do whatever he wants to it.